Hey everybody. Welcome to our next session at FeatureOps Summit 2026. My name is Michael Franti. I'm VP of Marketing here at Unleash. Really excited to be here with Tom Lightfoot, who is a technical lead at Dunelm. And I've gotten to know Tom over the last few weeks as we've talked about their use case, and really excited to share that with you today. I hope you're enjoying FeatureOps Summit as much as I am. I've been popping into all of the different tracks. I think, from hearing from customers, hearing from our engineers, really, really cool stuff. I think what you'll find in Tom's conversation is a really sophisticated view of migrating to a feature ops platform and system when kind of like the plane is already in the air. It's a lot of the talks that we heard from was kind of like, hey, we don't really have an established practice. We want to move towards feature ops because we want to, we want to move to trunk-based development. We want to do progressive rollouts and all of these things. I think what we'll find with Dunelm is like all of that was in place already, and yet they had a need to move to a new system. And so we're really going to dig into some of those details in case you're in a similar situation. You can kind of get some best practices, some things to do, some things to avoid. So that's what we're going to do for the next 20, 30 minutes. Tom, do you want to introduce yourself and share a little bit about what Dunelm does for those who might not know?
Hi, yeah, I'm Tom. As Michael's already adhered to, I am a tech lead at Dunelm. I've worked in engineering for sort of 8, coming on 9 years now. And yeah, like this is where I've landed. At Dunelm, we're a UK-based sort of like home and furnishings company, originated out of the Leicester markets and is expanded to a UK-wide and beyond, hopefully, moving forward. Home and furnishings company, one of the biggest in the UK, and we've got hundreds of stores, and we have a very big e-commerce website, which makes up anywhere between 30-40% of our sales. So it's a very, very big part of our business. Obviously, as we know, the world's moving online, so everything there is important.
Awesome. Well, I alluded a little bit to the fact that Dunelm had an established feature ops practice, and yet you've recently moved to Unleash through a migration. And I'm curious if you could just talk a little bit about what was the goal of that process? Kind of what was the business driver of moving over to Unleash?
Yeah, so the original sort of business driver was with our original provider. I think we went with what best fit at the time, and what made sense. And we were coming to the end of our contract, and I think we kind of just realised maybe their business outstripped ours. We were not maybe able to use all of the features that they had to offer, or maybe we were using the features that they had to offer with other services that we already had procured. So it didn't necessarily make sense to have such a large piece of software and kit for something that we wanted to be a bit more targeted and a bit more focused on feature flagging, or as Michael alludes to, and Unleash is all about feature ops. So yeah, that's what we wanted to work towards, something that's more appropriate and fits our needs.
Okay, great. That makes a ton of sense. So I'm kind of curious if we can just click kind of one level down into that. There are a lot of options on the market with regard to kind of feature flag providers, and everybody has their own special secret sauce, as they will, kind of the focus, kind of beyond simply turning features on and off. What was important for Dunelm as you looked for kind of a new option?
Yeah, so I think like naturally, as part of a new option, we had to consider how easy it was going to be to migrate from one system to another. So we would look at the APIs, how similar they were to what we already had. We didn't want to spend a year on migrating from one service to another because maybe the cost savings that we were making from reducing the size of our contracts wasn't going to be worth it because having to spend a whole year of developers' time making that switch. Outside of that, it was to still have all the functionality obviously available that we existingly use. So rollout strategies, the ability to roll out with infrastructure as code, Terraform specifically. Although Unleash doesn't have the biggest Terraform provider, we have some friends over at Philips Labs who have extended and made a third-party one, which we have also now been able to contribute to. One of our engineers, Sam, who's already worked with someone over at their team. So it's great that there's an open source community around Unleash as well. I think that is super favorable thing to have. Open source is sort of like one of the biggest drivers in the tech world. So that was also a massive appeal for what we were looking for.
Yeah, that's super interesting. One of the I guess from an open source perspective, we really try to make Unleash extensible. The idea being that, you know, we can have our own vision for how people want to adopt FeatureOps and the integration points, but like we don't always know. But one of the things we can do is make the platform really extensible. So in your view, it sounded like you identified a need, kind of the default option with Unleash wasn't all the way there yet, but you were able to extend it and have a really custom solution with minimal effort. Am I capturing that correctly?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, spot on.
Okay, that's great. One of the things we had talked about a little bit as well in your kind of in the prep for this session was around kind of transparency and visibility into kind of you know, levels of usage and things like that. Is that correct, that was one of the issues that came up previously, that there wasn't always clear kind of your level of consumption with the previous platform, and that moving to Unleash gave you a higher level of visibility?
Yeah, certainly. I think, you know, from day dot, we've been given access to dashboards, and if we needed to see further insights, Sebastian has been more than, our contact with Unleash, Sebastian has been more than forthcoming with any data that we've needed, which has made things really easy. When we initially rolled out with Unleash, we were seeing like conflicting data from our side. We were seeing timeouts, and you guys weren't seeing timeouts. But because of the transparency of being able to see that data, we could actually pin down the issue, which lied within our system, which is why we were seeing them and you guys weren't. And that is just another thing that made the migration process a lot easier. Just that constant transparency and openness to have the conversation throughout the whole process made it really easy. And in terms of communication, you know, we were able to have regular updates as much and as little as we wanted to, which included help from the support center. Really snappy responses there as well. Like every time they were getting back to us within the hour, which, you know, given the time differences, sometimes we weren't always expecting. So yeah, we have really good support throughout the process as well.
Okay, that's great to hear. I mean, one of the, like in any like there are the technology problems that we solve, and then there's kind of, you know, Unleash as a company that you do business with. And what I hear you saying is that, like, you know, the platform itself was transparent, extensible, performant, but also I'm hearing you know, mentioning Sebastian, who, for those of you who don't yet have the pleasure of knowing Seb, is one of our technical account managers. That kind of just in terms of ease of doing business with, right? Transparent pricing, you know, reactive support, help that's helped make the migration smooth beyond simply the technical capabilities. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, as much as I'm a technical lead, the technical part, especially with the world of AI, is becoming easier and easier. So the conversations and the communication between companies and people is, you know, that's becoming even more important.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. That was one of the big themes of Eva, our CTO's keynote, is kind of, you know, when the cost of code generation itself goes down, like what's left and how do engineering teams add value. And I think, you know, it's the non-technical pieces that are sometimes the differentiators now. I mean, technology is still hugely important, but it's not only tech, I think is the point.
Yeah.
You mentioned Sebastian, so I'll introduce a little bit of an anecdote, which is we have a weekly team meeting, and we like to hear how is it going with customers, so that everybody in the organization, including our engineers, can learn what's working well, like what areas can we help smooth out. And one week he talked about kind of Dunelm, I think onboarding, and then the next week he talked about like the migration is complete, and everybody was like, "Wow!" like the migration is already complete. Because again, some customers will kind of start new footprint with Unleash from scratch. There's no migration per se. It's just all new flags are on Unleash, but you had existing footprint of flags. And that migration itself was surprisingly fast. And so I'm kind of curious what you did beforehand to make that transition so straightforward.
Yeah, I think in part, like what made it so easy is we built functionality around the API, I guess. We use React for our front end platform. We built custom hooks. We weren't fully reliant necessarily on like an SDK that was up for offer. So to begin with Unleash, we've started out with just the basic JavaScript SDK and client, and that way that we could just plug the results of that straight into our custom hooks. Maybe there was a little bit of object manipulation to get things into the right shape to match what we had before. And now that we're off Unleash, we can maybe look forward to using the React SDK that you guys have for offer. So something that's a little bit more targeted. But yeah, everything seemed to just be lift and shift, really easy to migrate sideways. And then that API that's like available to interface with Unleash systems made it really easy to migrate over all the feature flags that we already had. The mappings just seemed to work. Maybe some things went in our favor. Maybe we were a little bit lucky as well, as it wasn't fully planned out for years and years and years. But yeah, I think one thing that we did well is we scoped out everything, so we knew there was no blind spots, and I think that helped out massively.
Okay. One of the things that you mentioned as part of the migration to me earlier was that you reduced the number of active flags. Do you remember kind of how many flags you had before and how many you had when you moved to Unleash? And kind of, did you learn anything from that process around managing feature flag lifecycle going forward?
Yeah, definitely. So I believe the number that we had was something around 125, and I think we got that all the way down to 80. So throughout the migration, something that we wanted is, you said we weren't starting from scratch, but it's always nice to have an excuse to lay out a clean slate. And this was sort of one of those times, so we could look at all the feature flags, speak to the teams, and be like, right, we don't want to move over any flags that we don't need to be there. And I think it was a slightly painful process maybe for the teams as well. It's much, much harder to get rid of a feature flag that has maybe lived for a year. There's uncertainty about removing it. There's always a little bit of uncertainty about removing code. You don't know whether you're going to miss an edge case. Yeah. So doing it sooner when people have more context is always easier. So we've now put in more mechanisms. We're interfacing with Unleash API to get access to the lifetime of a feature flag, so we can be a little bit more on the ball. And we want to hopefully in the future make use of the lifecycle concepts that Unleash has around feature flags.
Yeah, we have some data that in general, for every one flag that's deleted, 2 flags are created. And this is even given like all of the tools and insights into flag lifecycle, what should be archived, what hasn't been accessed. There's this inertia of like, we got to build, right? There's, we've got business objectives, we've got, we're behind on, our revenue targets and what can we do to fix it. And it's rare that you have executives that are coming to the team and being like, okay, we really got to prioritize technical debt. It's just like that's the reality. And it's one of the reasons, one of the things that Ivar mentioned in the keynote. If for the audience, if you didn't get a chance to watch that, could definitely go back and listen to the keynote, because he talks about what we call feature lifecycle management, which is the idea is that like we build a feature, we roll it out, we get feedback, and then eventually, we decide to keep it or we decide to, deprecate it. Like the feature flag that's attached to that, it should have a life cycle as well, meaning like the code path that exists to define shouldn't live forever. And I think you're right to point out, Tom, that it's like maybe theoretically, if we go back into Jira and we understand like why we created that flag and like, who was responsible, like, yeah, the context is there, but the reality is people have moved on, and it's sometimes really easy to just be like, doesn't seem to be hurting anything, let's just keep it there. But over time, that creates a lot of technical debt. So your team is really focused on, with a clean slate, leveraging the tools that Unleash provides to minimize that technical debt going forward. Is that
Yeah,
right?
yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think that was actually something that I think the more that we did the migration, and the more the more, I don't want to say we had to harass our teams into cleaning up and looking after their flags. I think we realized that it wasn't just the team's fault. I think we have to also do better to offer an easier way to manage feature flags. And yeah, I think Unleash has features that can make our lives easier from that point of view.
Yeah, one of the previous talks as well. I hope it's not a competitor. I don't know. I don't think they're in the UK market. Wayfair. If they're also things for the home, great market. Talking about kind of some of the MCP work that we've done to kind of enable your AI agents to identify stale flags. And because you hire the best and brightest people in available in tech, and you want them to solve hard problems, and then it's like, okay, well, like every once in a while you got to go in and just do this, like this chore of like, no one wants to do that. It's like not the thing that you're gonna I'm super excited about going in and cleaning up, but like now with AI, that's something that we can scope and enable agents to do a lot faster. I think that speaks to your point about giving the tools to the team in order to help them do what's right. It's a little bit like security. If you require people to do something in particular in order to be secure, you're pretty much guaranteed to not be secure because people get busy. So I want to talk a little bit maybe about some of the use cases for FeatureOps within Dunelm. When we spoke previously, you talked about like progressive rollouts and some experiments and operational controls like kill switches and things like that. I'm kind of curious from your perspective, what some of the use cases that you believe create the most business value are.
I think that would probably depend on who you speak to. Yeah, I think for Dunelm, the biggest use case for feature flags at the minute is experimentation. Being an e-commerce website, you're constantly trying to find new ways to present products and features to customers, to get customers to move between different trying to think of the word, trying to cross sell between different product types. And we're constantly trying to roll out new features that can do things like that. You can talk about the old, change the button color, that might have an impact, stuff like that. That's very simple. But, when you're looking to cross experiment lots of different features and do it in a controlled way, maybe you want to test two features on the same page at the same time, but not have them overlap with one another to so they have an impact on one another. So to have sectioned off and independent feature flags, that's something that's possible with Unleash. That's going to add the most value to a company like us, because when we can determinately say from an outcome of data that this feature is adding this much value, they're adding to the basket more, they're adding more revenue to their basket, etc., etc. They're landing on more product types, that's a win, a big win for us, and usually will have a big impact. So yeah, I'd say experimentation and getting the insights and analytics from the data of that.
Okay. Yeah, this is it's interesting that you would say that. Perhaps not surprising given that this is FeatureOps Summit, because one of the core principles behind FeatureOps is that software teams shouldn't just ship code. They should also measure the outcomes of that code. And kind of we like to say that DevOps gets code into production, right? That's your whole CI/CD system. But like the code itself, it's that is the unit. It's kind of it's an object or a set of objects. What it actually does, right? As long as it's on that server somewhere, right? DevOps has succeeded in the deployment. But whether or not it's doing what the business wants or what the user wants, that's kind of a separate concern. And the two obviously need to work together. I'm curious, kind of as an organization that has this mindset, how has the ability to gradually roll out, to run experiments, change the way your teams think about software releases and the success of those releases?
Yeah, I mean, it just allows us to be flexible, and it allows the engineering teams to worry about the code they're delivering, putting it behind a feature flag, and then, to be honest, that implementation is where their involvement ends, because then you've got a service which can simply control the rollout, and you've got products, the product team determining when they want to roll out, how they want to do it, and then you've got the experimentation team in a combined effort analyzing the data, looking at what the outcome is, and then the engineering team doesn't have to worry about it anymore. Like you said, it's the code is sort of like a product in and of itself, and the engineering team don't have to worry about it up until the decision is made based on the outcome, like we just spoke about.
Got it. So the if I understand correctly, the engineering team doesn't have to be the primary driver for rolling out or evaluating tests or understanding which version is working better. Like the product management team has access to that data, and once the kind of the two versions are available in production, that it's the FeatureOps platform that can determine kind of, you know, traffic allocation between, and then the product teams can understand, okay, this one is driving more revenue to shopping cart, or, you know, more whatever repeat purchases, whatever that business metric is.
Yeah, exactly that. And I think like another feature of Unleash that we've been able to utilize is impression data. Being able to pick out which feature flags we want to know the impressions that users are having on. It's been a really helpful thing. Originally, we were having to report all our feature flags into our GTM layer, and then the GTM layer was responsible for picking out flags that we wanted. With utilizing impression data, we know upfront which feature flags we care about reporting on. Thus, we don't have to send every single one. We can just report on the flags that we care about. So that's another saving grace for us.
Got it. And GTM being Google Tag Manager, is that right?
Yes. Yeah. Correct. Sorry. Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah. Yeah. No worries. Awesome. So I'm kind of curious from a culture perspective. Have you seen a change in how kind of product and engineering teams work together, like avoid each other at the water cooler, you know, come together for lunch more since you've adopted this kind of FeatureOps mindset?
I avoid each other. It's maybe a bit too harsh. Not have to bump into each other is probably more of a better term for words. And you know, we spoke about how communication is the big issue. I mean, you don't want to not talk enough, such that you are working in completely different train tracks, for example. But yeah, it's nice to have that separation of concerns at a working level. it just makes everyone's lives easier at that point, I guess.
Yeah, you don't have to coordinate every single thing,
Yeah.
because engineers responsible for, hey, we're going to code up the test, right? So, and then we're going to get it into production, and then you can manage it. You can determine who's the winner, and then roll it out to 100%. Like there's more independent decision making that's available to the product team, and not everything has to be an email or a Slack message to engineers to make changes.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, exactly that. I mean, I've worked with engineers, the less little tweaks and things, we have to create a Jira ticket for a one-line change. It's like the worst thing in the world. The less we have to do that, the better. And yeah, I think moving towards using FeatureOps is the way forward from that perspective.
Okay, awesome. Since you've been through this process recently, I'm kind of curious, as we wrap up, kind of what advice you might give to other tech leads that are evaluating FeatureOps platforms. Is there any criteria or kind of features or anything like that you would encourage them to focus on?
Yeah, I think as we spoke about earlier, the transparency. I think that's something you only really learn from communicating with the companies, is whether you're going to get that or not. I think that being a glaring pain point for us in the past, to what now is a really easy process, has made a big difference to our confidence within sort of our FeatureOps platform. Outside of that, I think a big importance, speaking from a developer's point of view, is the developer experience. How easy is it to use? How good is the documentation? One feature of the documentation that you guys have is AI docs. That helps you points us in the right direction a lot easier. As good as documentation can be, sometimes just finding out where you need to be in the documentation isn't always the easiest thing. So that was much easier for us. And then in terms of what could a technical lead do, is just the boring work, the scoping out, making sure that you don't have those blind spots that might come back to bite you in the future. So yeah, I just focus on those three things really: sort of observability, ease of use, and blind spots really. Yeah.
Okay, great. Well said. And my last question for you is kind of what's next. You've completed the FeatureOps migration unleash. Teams are seeing a lot of value with experimentation. You focused on the developer experience. What's next over the next few years at Dunelm? Like what would you like to do now that you have a platform that could support it?
Yeah. It's always difficult to say exactly what's next without giving too much away. But I think we're excited to explore all the features that Unleash has to offer. I think I alluded to having targeted experimentation on pages for certain groups of users. That's something that we're not currently doing, but we're definitely looking to explore. Consistent user journeys between associated feature flags, again, something that we're not currently doing, but looking to explore. Hopefully just being able to refine experimentation to user groups more and more over time. So you get to a point as a large business, you optimize and optimize and optimize, and then that becomes micro optimize. So you have to dive deeper, you have to dig deeper into the detail. And I think as a company, that's probably at the point where we're getting to. We're really trying to refine our product and our offering, and that's what we're looking forward to doing with Unleash moving forward.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Tom. This has been really interesting talk for me, very enlightening. I wish you all the best. Stay cool, and ping Seb if you need anything. We're always here to help. And have a great rest of your day.
Awesome. All right. Thank you very much, Michael.
Bye.